a team mimics the person that is leading them. If you've got shortcomings, it is quite easy for your team to also show some of those shortcomings. Would you think that's fair, or at least that's my experience?
People will mimic what you bring to the table if they are in some way inspired by it. I like to say trust is the glue that bonds teams together, and that also allows creativity to flow. And when people feel safe and comfortable enough to share, they will contribute more of their best ideas and their best selves. And that drives innovation. First of all, I think, shy and introverted is not really the same thing, right? Yeah. Or lack of confidence. It's not the same thing. You could be very confident and be introverted. But again, communication isn't just about language and words.
Was it just a brazen confidence that just sort of got you through it, or did you gain confidence over time?
We have to realize that we are the only ones who can empower ourselves. But the power is already inside of you. And we have all these leadership courses nowadays, but what is it that a leader really needs?
Sometimes we are afraid to do something. You fear shame. I don't want shame. We're trying to break that burden by sharing stories of courage, resilience, and we want to be able to celebrate your story.
Shameless.
Hello, Shameless family. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Dzikamai, and I'm the host of the Shameless Podcast. And today we have Regina Huber. How are you doing today, Regina?
I am doing excellent, Zika. Thank you so much for having me on. I was really looking forward to this conversation.
And the thing about this conversation that I'm really excited about is because for anybody who's looking to lead or is maybe struggling in being led, I think this episode is for you. And so Regina is, renowned. She's got a lot of frameworks and she's done a lot of different things. But maybe to touch in on the topic at hand is, how does your mindset affect your communication style? And maybe what frameworks does Regina have for us in order to be able to sort of jump straight in? And in this modern world where everything is fast-paced, moving, I mean, we talk about AI, you talk about remote work, not remote work. We don't know these days. Crazy deadlines, burnout. Leaders are really being stretched. They're being stretched on all fronts. And the question is, in order for an individual to lead, they could probably deal with a lot of tips, a lot of frameworks. And I think we have got none other than, somebody who's a game changer in this space. So don't be stuck in your old school ways, the micromanaging, hostile boss that is transactional. I think there may be some tips that we might be able to get in here. And it's not about tech, and tech is not the end and be all and end all. It is actually a mindset that we can work on, and we can look to be better and perform better and have our teams performing a lot better. So without any further ado, Regina Huber is the CEO of Transform Your Performance. And Regina, would you mind maybe just introducing yourself to our guests?
Sure. As you said, I'm the CEO of Transform Your Performance. This is a training, coaching, and speaking business that I created starting in 2012 when I just moved up from Brazil, where I lived before, to New York City in the US. Currently, I'm splitting my time between France and the US. And I've lived in many other places. I've also traveled on the African continent quite a bit. We chatted a little bit about that before. I have a very multicultural and multinational and also multilingual background, which helps me connect with diverse clients quite easily, which I love because I like, I thrive in change. I'm somebody who thrives in change. I know not everybody does, but I do. And I love to inspire through I also have a podcast, actually, Rise to Lead, and I love to inspire through both online and in-person speaking. I'm a transformational leadership coach and also a freedom coach, because everything I do is really in the service of freedom, whether you do what you do as a leader or in any other capacity.
And so when we were talking a bit earlier on, you mentioned something about dance. And that you love dance. And how did you get into that firstly? And how does dance translate into the work that you do?
Yeah, first of all, I did not grow up with dance. I grew up in a tiny village on a farm, so there was not really that much dancing going on. It was also quite a few decades ago, right? so, so there was no internet to look up dance shows, and and yeah, I did do some folkloric dancing. Now that I think about it, as a little girl, and then I just really started when I moved to Munich, really, with some Latin dancing. Then later I moved around the world a little bit, and I picked up dances here and there. Wherever I moved, I always was looking for dance. So initially there was mostly Latin dancing. And then, and I lived in Brazil, in Argentina, and Spain, and other places in the US, where there's a pretty big diversity of cultural influences. And eventually, I also started doing several different African dances. Initially, I came to those through Afro-Cuban, Afro-Brazilian dances, but I really currently love to do sabar dancing, Congolese and dombolo dancing, and some of the more modern tunes like the Afrofusion, a little bit of Afrobeat. I'm not the greatest at those, but I love them. And yeah, so there's just a lot there. Wherever I moved, I picked something up, and whatever was available. Also partner dancing, which taught me a lot about leadership and followership, really, and about nonverbal communication, about energy. Dancing is all about teamwork and using your space on the dance floor, just like you use your space in an organization, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot I could tell you about the lessons that I learned from dance. There's a huge list of lessons. I think one that I do want to mention also is presence. We show up in a certain way as leaders, and dance has definitely helped me improve my business presence.
And I mean, that's absolutely fascinating because before you mentioned it, I never truly had that appreciation that dance can translate so much into leadership or followership, and that's beautiful. But before we get stuck into this dance world, I am also further or even more curious around some of the frameworks that you have sort of built over time. And in particular, which framework are we going to focus on today?
So there's a page on my website, transformyourperformance.com, with all the different frameworks. Most of them are for leadership, not all of them, but most of them are. And the one that I really would like to talk about, because it's so key in team leadership, is the new paradigm leadership framework. And the intention of it is to help us build more engaged and happier teams, to really be able as a leader to become a thriving leader with a thriving team. Yes. And I wish I'd had some of those frameworks, or at least more concrete materials, back when I was thrown into my first leadership position at age 26 in Spain, when I had just moved to Spain and learned Spanish about 10 months earlier. And I didn't really have any leadership background or expertise or experience, right? And so I didn't have all that. So I thought, okay, you know what? We have all these leadership courses nowadays, but what is it that a leader really needs apart from the those leadership skills that everybody talks about? right? What
Yeah.
else is there that we need nowadays? And what are those new paradigms that I personally would like to bring into leadership? And that's how this particular framework was born. And it has four specific components.
Okay, so with those four specific components, please, I am curious to understand in order of the one which you found has brought the greatest provides the greatest advantage to people, provides the most support, or the one that is the most common that people tend to struggle with? Which one would that be? And then we can rattle through the four of them. And, or please don't constrain yourself. I am always keen to hear stories, always keen to hear a juicy story about any one of these frameworks, and how they sort of have helped people, or any experience around it, or bad experience there also.
Right. So all the four components are, of course, connected. They're not separate, and they even overlap. I know you love to talk about mindset, and so do I. I call a mindset that serves us in our intentions and in our goals. I call that a self-empowering mindset. And that's definitely also part of several of my frameworks, and definitely also maybe the first one to mention, because your mindset impacts all you do. It determines your vision as a leader and how big that vision can get. And it also determines whether you will be able to bring that drive and enthusiasm into your team as well, right?
Yeah.
Because once you have leveled up your own mind and master what I call this self-empowering mindset, it'll also be easier to level up the collective mindset of your team. So that
And
is the first
and
component.
and and that's so curious, so interesting, because um a lot of the time you find that a team mimics the person that is leading them. And if you don't if you've got shortcomings, it is quite easy for your team to also show some of those shortcomings. Is Would you think that's fair, or at least that's my experience?
Yeah, I
You can
think
say I'm wrong. I don't
yes.
mind.
No, no, no. It's totally. You could have two. I could see both sides of that answer. I think people will mimic what you bring to the table if they are in some way inspired by it, right? So they will mimic something, or try to emulate something that they consider positive, that they consider beneficial, if they feel like you are showing up authentically also, right? So the transparency, and that feeds a little bit into another component already, which is trust. But that is very, very important to me personally, and I think it's to many people. Now,
And
they,
go for
yeah,
it.
and then of course, yes, they will also if you are not enthusiastic about your own work, and how do you want their team to be enthusiastic about a project that you bring to them, right? I mean, it's just normal. We all interact energetically, we all interact emotionally as human beings in all these different ways, so definitely it has an impact in any sense.
Yeah. And when you look at mindset, what do you think actually helps build a strong mindset, a resilient mindset, or favorable mindset, the one that not only works for yourself, but then is able to then be effective in leading teams?
Well, we have to realize that we are the only ones who can empower ourselves. We often hear, oh, I empower so and so, or people say, oh, this person empowers other people. I don't think that's even possible. I think you can only empower yourself. Your power is already inside of you, and it's a matter of connecting with your power. And I have said this over and over again, and I will say it over and over again because it's so, so important. Other people can guide you. They can help you empower yourself, like a coach, for example, or a mentor, or your manager, hopefully. And and they can give you resources. Yes, for sure. They can give you money. They can give you whatever resources you need to do your work, right? But the power is already inside of you, and when you can transmit that to your team and really instill that they already have it inside of them, I think that will bring out so much in your team, that you didn't even expect. One of the aspects of this that will certainly come out more is creativity, because once people realize the power and the unlimited potential they have inside of themselves, they become more confident about bringing their ideas, about contributing. They become more, if they also feel safe and are encouraged to bring those ideas, that makes a huge difference. So yeah, it's about resilience, but it's not only about resilience. It's also really about this seeing your own potential, but also seeing that of your individual team members. Once you see
So
your own brilliance, it becomes easier to see that of your team. And that's why self awareness is so important.
So I'm extremely curious because, and I love this whole mindset, self-empowering mindset, because your destiny is in your own hands and you've got the ability to be more, do better. And and I'm curious to hear a story. Any sort of, I mean, you've got vast experiences. You've done multiple levels of coaching. I mean, I'm curious to see or hear sort of an experience whereby you've taken somebody through some form of a journey, and how did that look like on your end, and whether and if it was challenging as well. I'm extremely curious.
No, absolutely. So there are many, many stories, of course. I don't even know what to pick. Uh, let's just take somebody who is in like a new leadership role, like I was, when I was 26, and I did not even expect any of that. It was a total surprise. So I sometimes work with people who either want to be in such a role and they are working their way into it, or who are also sort of thrown into it, and they become, all of a sudden they are a manager, but then they're also supposed to be a leader as in that manager role, right? So
Yeah.
so what happens is oftentimes what happens is we underestimate ourselves. And that's happened to quite a lot of my clients. So that's exactly what's in the way then, not trusting our own abilities. And uh, a lot of people think, well, I need to have all this technical knowledge, all this whatnot, and I need to know everything before I step into this role. But if you knew everything, then it wouldn't be a new role, would it? I mean,
No.
you know, you always think, oh, to get this promotion, I need to know everything before. I need to check all the boxes, all the requirements. But no, because then it would not be growth for you. And would you want to step into a role where you already know everything and you're bored on day two? Probably not. So really trust yourself to learn along the way. And if you allow me, I could use my own story for a moment for this,
Please
even
go for it. Please go
because
for it.
it is the story of many of my clients too.
Yeah.
So when I was 26, I just, as I said before, moved to Spain. I had just learned Spanish. I was in Madrid now, and there was this unexpected opportunity, a leadership role of a team of about 25 people at the time, and the whole operations and management of the entire office. And this happened only 10 months after I had just moved there. And shortly after, I was even entrusted also with the opening of a new office in Portugal, but that's a different story. So there's nothing too extraordinary about it. It happens to other people too, except that at the time I had zero leadership background or studies or any proof that I could do this. And someone simply saw the potential in me. And so I was invited to apply as one of several candidates, and the others being external candidates with background in leadership, actually, but I was chosen. And I believe that what the partners in that office and the people who interviewed me saw was really that potential because of my proactiveness, because I'd always, so that's something I want to give people, right? As a message, your proactiveness is really what makes oftentimes a difference. So I made suggestions for improvement, da 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 da. And what's in the way oftentimes of people is not trusting your own abilities. Initially, I also thought, Zika, who am I to step into this role? I just moved
Mm,
here. I just learned Spanish. I have no leadership experience, no studies, da da da. And most importantly, will the team actually accept me?
yeah.
There could have been jealousy, envy, whatnot. And here's what I did, right? I Thinking back, at the time I wasn't even so conscious about it, but I really had the mindset of I'm going to do my best.
Yeah.
And people noticed that, you know, because now I was expected to manage and lead a diverse team, all these different processes. It was a very multifaceted job. And I had to learn to set boundaries. That's another thing. And to juggle all these different balls at a time. And when I think back, it's really this: to come with authenticity, to come with a pure intention, to show your team that you care about them, you know. And oftentimes it's not just about the team that you manage and lead, but also your peers. In my case, it was also the team of the partners, of the local partners of that consulting firm I was working at. Right? It's
Yeah.
it's really about showing up authentically, showing that you truly care and that you care for all stakeholders, not
Mm,
just for one group.
yeah. And I'm extremely interested in when you got that role
Mhm.
there. I mean, obviously you would have been terrified, I'm assuming.
A little bit.
And then was it just a brazen confidence that just sort of got you through it, or did you gain confidence over time? How did that sort of transition happen between that being a little bit terrified, being proactive, trying your hardest, authentically showing up, but then over time understanding and developing that identity?
Absolutely. It is practice, of course. And at the same time, I do believe that my genuine heart-centered approach made it all possible. People
Okay.
trusted me because they saw that I was well-meaning. They recognized that intention in my words and in my behaviors, in my actions, and in my energy. And that's another thing that I didn't know consciously at the time. But we talked about dance earlier and energy, right? But what's the energy you show up with? you
Mm.
know that's very, very important, because
And
for
that
a leader, presence is key.
that energy, sometimes the energy comes with confidence, or which one comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So if you're not
Mhm.
confident, how will you have the energy to show up, or have the presence to be there? How did you manage
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, but
Or were you just confident?
there are also people who are overconfident, and they come across as not trustworthy necessarily either. So, intention is energy in reality
Yeah,
also.
fair enough.
Everything in the end
Yes.
is energy anyway, right? And
Yes.
our energy always talks faster and louder than our words. And when our energy is unaligned with our words, our energy wins. That's something really important to remember, right?
Fully understand.
Yeah.
With you having learned Spanish, how did that hurdle? How did you cross that hurdle? Because communication is a large portion of, I mean, verbal is a large portion of being able to command that presence, to give that vision, to drive a team. How did you overcome that language barrier? Or you're just really good at languages, German, Portuguese, Spanish. The list trails on.
Yeah. So, look. This is actually the second element of the of the framework, right? Which I call message here, but it stands for communication. Uh, so language is one piece of it, but again, communication isn't just about language and words. It's about everything. It's about the whole package. It's about our body language, our posture, our energy again comes in, of course, our appearance, our, how do we show up? Uh, there's also a vocabulary of silence, even. And yes, the right words do matter, of course, but people are also forgiving if they see that you are making an effort in your communication and that you listen to them, right? It's not always you who talks. As a leader, we want to listen oftentimes more than we talk. It's actually quite beneficial. So, yes, we want to also get our message across, and that does require effective, confident communication and all of that, and some communication skills and language skills. But also, I actually had a lot of course, chances to practice my language a lot. Like right now, I'm currently physically in France, and although I studied French way before Spanish in school, my French is much worse. My spoken French, let's say, I can write it. I studied all of it at one point, right? But my it doesn't come out as fluently just because I work in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and German all day, mostly in English. But and then I go out at night to a store or to my dance class, and then in dance class we don't talk much anyway, right? And then I am supposed to speak French, and it's not coming out as fluently. I didn't have that problem in Spain because, first of all, the Spanish love to talk a lot and fast. The challenge I did have, though, in the beginning was when for example, when we'd go to lunch together, the Spanish talk loud, and so it was really hard to sometimes to understand anything. It was ba 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 ba, everything at the same time. It's part of the mentality. It's part of the culture, which
Yeah.
is which is fun, but it's just hard at the beginning to follow the conversation and to actually chip into the conversation and contribute. But over time, that gave me a lot of really thrown into the cold water practice, so to speak. Yeah.
And then, I mean, because then that brings the second layer of the cultural component, right? So that messaging and the cultural component, how do you then navigate that? Because that is, I guess you have to listen a lot more and understand what the cultural norms are before you offend somebody. So how do you manage that? Because leading a team of culturally diverse people in a space where you yourself is not necessarily accustomed with everything
Yeah.
has got its pitfalls or potential pitfalls. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example of that. Like when I moved years later, I moved to
Yeah.
California, and actually I was rehired for the same consulting firm. And what happened is one of the my team members, an Asian lady, she said to me, "You talk so loud." And the Californians are already a little bit more on the softer side than the East Coast people. They are a little bit more sugarcoating like. So that's the difference between East and West Coast of the US in rough terms, not the
Yeah.
only difference. Now, and that struck me a little bit at the time because, oh well, maybe I should pay more attention to this. And of course, yes, there are several different age. Also, there's a lot of difference between the individual Asian countries too, like there is between the individual African countries, as you know. But there was this thing where I said, okay, well, I'm going to just be a little bit more sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And then as we move around the world, not just traveling but also living in different places, that sensitivity is heightened over time, right? Because I actually used to be the shyest kid in town, so for me to be called loud, that was weird. you know?
Whoa, hold on. So you used to be shy?
Totally. I grew up in a small village with, back then we had like 9 or 10 houses in the village. And there was nobody really my exact age in terms of kids. I mean, all the kids were playing together outside, and as in it happens in a village, right? But
Yeah.
or it used to, at least, when there were no electronics.
Yeah.
So yeah. But still, I was very shy. I mean, if you saw a photo of of the first or second grade, you would, uh, I'm looking on the floor, I think, or something. It's So I had to overcome that, because I did want to see a piece of the world, and I did want to travel and move to different places. So yeah, it was no choice for me. I had to really work on my self-esteem, but also on my confidence over time.
And
And
so I've got a very curious thing, because um a lot of the time you see leaders, whether charismatic, whether it is a large presence, and a lot of people who I've spoken to say, look, I'm an introvert. My
Mhm,
leadership style is a little bit more quiet, and sometimes loud people like loud people, and so then they don't get the opportunity, or more introverted or quieter personnel might not get the opportunity to step up into a leadership role, and be able to actually eh, showcase what they have to give and what they can give. And I'm curious to understand from your point of view how somebody who might be shy, who might be
mhm,
introverted, who might not necessarily be able, might struggle to step forward.
mhm.
What tips would you be able to give them to say, be yourself, be,
Yeah.
go for it? You know what I'm asking.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack in your question, right? There's several different questions. I think in one, first of all, I think, shy and introverted is not really the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Or lack of confidence. It's not the same thing. You could be very confident and be introverted. You can change your confidence or your shyness over time. You can transform that, but you will probably always be introverted if you are an introverted person. And the same for extroverted. I'm actually an ambivert, so I'm right in between the two,
Yeah. Okay.
according to tests, right?
Yes.
So I need my me time, my alone time, and I also love to be social. It's the two. I actually just recently did a podcast episode specifically on introversion for my Rise to Lead podcast. If anybody wants to check that out, it was with Greg Weinger, and he specializes in helping leaders who are introverted, right? And what we talked about also was, how to see the strength in each, because there is strength in each. They would not exist if they didn't have value, both of them, right? And you
Yeah.
might also find a lot of public speakers who are introverted, by the way. Okay, so it's not just about being loud. Your message doesn't necessarily have to be loud. We want to take the benefits of both characters. For example, in a networking situation, the extroverted person might be the one who more easily, connects people, right? Um, because it comes more natural to them to just say, hey, you know what, you should meet so and so, you should meet so and so. The introverted person might, sometimes want a little more time to think, and then they bring maybe something very substantial to the table, like something very thought through. And these are just examples. Uh, there are probably many more and better ones, but uh, so it's not a disadvantage. It's just a different way you express your strengths, you know?
And I absolutely love that, because the idea of owning your power, owning your freedom, owning yourself, and then being able to express your strength within
Mhm.
you. It just means that you should just be comfortable with being yourself. And that's the way that you can also be authentic. That's the way you can also build from there. So I have only gotten to on the framework, the first framework, which is the self-empowering mindset, and then the second one is messaging. So I really want to hear the third.
Oh yeah, the third element is trust. So we have now mind, message, and trust, right? So trust is, I like to say, trust is the glue that bonds teams together, and that also allows creativity to flow. And when people feel safe and comfortable enough to share, they will contribute more of their best ideas and their best selves. And that drives innovation. So, and you mentioned
Mm,
it before, right? When we show up authentically and when we allow others to do the same, they show up with with the benefits they have to offer, their skills they have to offer, that their maybe their $1 million ideas or $1 billion ideas, that if they don't feel safe in an environment, they might keep to themselves, right?
mm,
And so trust building is really key with everybody in all directions as a leader, with your team, with your peers, your customers, clients, business partners, whoever that is. It comes, in my opinion, also through transparency and, of course, through being authentic, because we cannot, if we feel like someone's not authentic, it's just not easy to trust them. Why would
yeah.
I trust you if I think, oh, you know what, Zika is just like, he's going to tell me something and then he's going to turn around and say something completely different to the other person and something bad about me, whatever. So that doesn't work too well, at least not in the long run.
And that's something that sometimes I feel some pitfalls that exist, whereby um, that person who comes to you talking to you about somebody else, your question is they probably saying the same thing about you as soon as you turn your back, and then subsequently, and I guess that's peer to peer, but subsequent, or even with somebody who's leading you, but then we talk about micromanaging, right? And that creates such a interesting dynamic. Do you have any words around micromanagement, and or I mean, whether it's combating or as a leader how not to micromanage, or as somebody who's in underneath the leader who's micromanaging, sort of, because that's all centered around trust, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. You're right. I was going to say that. And I actually wrote several articles about this, and they have to do with delegation also, right?
Okay.
So when you don't trust your team, how do you expect your team to trust you, first of all? I mean, trust is a two-way street, always. And the thing is, you expect them to trust you, but then when it comes to them doing their work, and maybe they do it differently, and that's totally fine as long as you get to your goal, right? Or you achieve the outcome or the results you need. So the thing is, we sometimes want people to do it exactly in the same way as we
Yeah.
do it. And that might not always even be the best way or the most effective way or efficient way. And some people, different people have different ways of doing and of being, and that's okay. And that's what makes the richness of collaboration and co-creation in a team. I mean, if we knew how to do everything that our team members know how to do in their own way, then we would just need more time, but not a team, right? To do it all. And when you
And
when you actually start delegating according to strengths, that requires also that you get to know your team better, because
yeah.
then you can delegate according to strengths. And then again, it comes back to the trust. Now they also need to trust that they can come to you and ask for support when they need that support. So it has a lot to do with trust in many ways.
And the thing that's quite interesting as well is that the second that somebody delegates to you, Now the responsibility lies on you in order to, you know, to be able to step up into that. You know, it's there's a pressure that comes with it, but there's a responsibility, there's a an honor. I mean, it is I guess to a degree fulfilling as well. So the fourth one, the fourth
Yeah.
framework.
The fourth one might be a little surprising. The fourth component of the framework. Okay,
Yes,
it's
sorry.
all of the same framework. Yeah, the new paradigm
Yes.
leadership. And people can check out the other frameworks on my website by themselves. But so the fourth component is called heart. And that has,
Heart.
yes, yes, yes. So my podcast is all about bold and heart-centered leadership. So heart is not surprising to me, but it is surprising to some other people. So it has multiple meanings, actually. First of all, heart stands for the people of your organization, on the one hand, right? Because people are the heart of any organization. And I really hope it stays that way and we're not all replaced by robots, right?
Well,
Nobody wants that.
I mean, at this point in time, I don't even know who's real, what's real. Is this?
Right,
No,
right,
completely agree with you. Yes. So
right.
the heart
Yeah,
is the people. So as long as, please elaborate. So as long as
yeah.
we keep people first, or what do we mean
So,
by?
yeah, I think it's very important to remember that because we always talk about goals, 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 but they're not possible without the people. And the more you take care of the people and the more you allow them to grow, which is also part of it, that the more they will be loyal, the more they will feel committed to actually contribute to the team's goals and to the organization's goals, right? And that's one piece of it. People are the heart of the organization. It also stands, I talk about heart set also. So I talk about mindset and heart set. And what does that mean? Well, we humans connect with each other and with other people, everything around us, the world around us, through our hearts, through the strong electromagnetic field of our hearts, of our physical heart, actually, which is 1,000 times stronger than the magnetic field of our head brain. Right? Actually, it's several thousand times stronger. And our hearts also hold, so I believe that, our heart holds our unique wisdom, the wisdom we acquire. So we have the mind as the intellectual tool that we can use. It's also, of course, a programming tool. So we have the subconscious mind that we are programmed in that way, conditioned, which could be both to our benefit or to our detriment, right? And most of us, or all people I know, have both. But then also, it it is the place where we store our wisdom, our unique wisdom that helps us make those life-changing decisions for ourselves that nobody else can make for us, right? And then
Yeah.
it also is a source for intuition, which is highly underrated in business and in leadership. It was given to us for a reason. It's not there to be wasted or to be ignored. And it's also the source for courage. So our mind is where we feel fear. That's the source of fear, but our heart can be the source for courage. So yeah, and it's also, of course, yes, for compassion, love, and I believe that those have a very important place in business, although we have maybe been told over and over that they don't.
So that intuition piece. So
Mhm.
we talk a lot about data, you talk a lot about information, and in this modern world, leaders might be driven towards maybe suppressing a more intuitive decision as
Mhm.
opposed to something that's informed by information and data. Why do you say that is a big piece, that intuition? I mean, unless I've got it wrong,
Yeah. No, you
when
have
you
it
talk
right.
about,
Yeah.
why do you feel like that is such a piece that's missing, or why do you feel like it's so important?
Well, we are very much educated in a way that everything that's important, all that matters is analytical skills. And of course, yes, there, if you work, for example, in finance or whatever, yes, that's important for sure. I would never say, and I haven't never said to replace data with
Yep.
intuition. I just believe that both can go hand in hand, and then actually we have that ideal combination, just like with mind heart, and oftentimes we actually think we have facts, and then they turn out not to be facts at all in hindsight, right?
Yes.
Just look at all the different things we learned at school. How many of those were actually lies or were whatnot, and they have been treated as facts, like about
Yep.
history, about science, or they were revised because somebody after some time found out that was actually not a fact at all, right? So we have both, and oftentimes we think it's a fact, but it's not really objectively a fact either, because we consider it a fact, right? So I
Mm.
believe that yes, data, oftentimes it is important. It's important to do our due diligence. I'm not saying, oh, just pick a team member for promotion just because you feel like it. No, you want to look at who they are, what do they bring to the table, what are their skills, for sure. And sometimes you might have two team members who are either completely different or quite comparable and they are both great candidates, or you might want to hire somebody, and you don't know who to pick. Well, so your intuition is your personal truth. That's your truth. It's not always something that we're taught on to listen to. So people are often confused about, is this really my intuition, or is it some other, like something speaking in my head or somebody else speaking in my head? It just require a little bit of practice to trust your intuition, especially when in the past you didn't listen to it, and
Mm.
you then lost your trust in yourself, or in your self, or you lost that self-esteem. That's happened to me too in my life once, and I found it really hard to trust my intuition, but it wasn't actually because I didn't have it in that situation. It was because I didn't listen to it. In hindsight, if I think about it, then there was a voice talking to me inside of me saying, hey, maybe that's not the right thing. Maybe, there's something else there that you're not seeing. And I was just ignoring that. And I believe that, of course, also when it's about personal decisions, then intuition is very important, because your personal decision of, for example, to move somewhere or to leave your job behind for something else or for a business, it might not make sense to your parents or to your siblings or to someone else. It might, seem like a risk to them that you should please not take, but to you, it might make sense. To your heart, it might make sense.
And that portion of, and I really, because I want to tie it back to the first one, because when you are able to reflect your and your intuition and trusting your own intuition, you then also start to really talk to that whole mindset and understanding yourself a lot more and being able to really unlock what you have. Because like, and you said it, I mean, you said it at the beginning, that all of these things, sort of all of those four components of the framework, really intertwine. And it was a very unfair question to ask you, pick the first one that's the most important
Yeah.
one, because I mean, I mean, I'm like I agree with you when you started, but now I'm like, wait, but how is heart not your first one? It's like
I
picking
because it
your
was
favorite child.
because it was very hard to pick, and if I had started with heart, people would say, "What is she talking about?" You know. Isn't it like that, right?
Yeah,
No, and
completely.
no, I don't have any shame around it. By the way, I'm shameless in that sense. However, sometimes you need to guide people a little bit toward an idea that they might not
Mm,
be too keen on accepting right away. And I'm not saying our audience doesn't. I'm just saying I find that sometimes that ideas that are not like talked about every single day in
yeah.
leadership, they sometimes require a little bit of leading into, which is yeah, normal.
And so with that, I have got the one. I guess it's the crystal ball. If I'm giving, I would love to get the insight from your vast experiences. I would love for you to tell me what that future looks like. What's that bold prediction for what the future looks like in terms of leadership, transformative leadership, sort of where are we going, or what do we need to do in order to be better versions of leaders?
I'm going to tell you what I ideally would like that to look like, right? Because I really trust that more leaders will stand up to this, and I really do hope so. Because we've seen, especially in the last few years, it's been very blatant that a lot of leaders actually did not trust themselves enough. I mean, there's also blatant ignorance sometimes, but when leaders have the knowledge of what's going on in the world and they play along with agendas anyway, and they're unable to protect their teams and themselves in the end, that's because they don't feel safe as leaders. They
Mm,
don't, there's an insecurity there, and they don't dare to stand up and don't dare to use their heart and find that courage, right? So that is something that I'm really, really, yeah, hoping to see more of that heart-centered leadership, and more of that bold leadership too, and really also having the guts to introduce new paradigms, to introduce new ideas that might not always find approval right away because they're different, right?
yeah.
But I also believe that if you want your team to trust your decisions, and start by being transparent about your intentions and the why behind them, and maybe you bring your team behind you first sometimes. So when
Mm,
people understand the why behind your actions, this builds clarity, trust, and alignment. And once you are aligned, you're no longer alone with this concept or idea, or with that value that you would like to defend. And it and here's a little bonus about that, right? It also takes the pressure off you to pretend that you have all the answers always,
mm,
because being honest about your motives, and about what you are still learning yourself,
mm,
that invites collaboration. And that also creates a culture where others feel safe to do the same, and to even support you in your learning, and share, and also in sharing their ideas, of course, that I said before, right? But also sharing their need for support. And I think transparency is such a big topic to me. Really, it is. It is, of course, again related to trust, and it's super, super important to get that, yeah, that support behind you as well as a leader.
and
And also, and one other thing that I want to add, uh,
go for it.
which hardly anybody talks about: allow yourself to have fun at work. Everyone I know wants life more fun, and life includes work for most of us, right?
Yeah.
So, what if you could bring more fun and joy to your workplace? Wouldn't that be something? So, I believe that everybody yearns for that, especially in these times when we don't know what the world is going to look like tomorrow. We all need those vibes right now, and
Yeah.
we need them often.
So, this for me has been so refreshing, I guess, is probably the word I'll use. And I know that you do a lot around the different frameworks that we talked about,
Mhm.
the one framework with the four components, but you got multiple frameworks that you've also written about, and you're really strong around I think it's freedom. You've got something to do with freedom, something about
Yeah.
being authentically yourself and just kicking doors down and being the best version of yourself. And I really take your hope of that bold leadership, that ability to build a new, not a new, but a safe space, a space that is authentic and honest and heart centered, like you mentioned, where people have guts and a true reason why. And so, my question actually to the listeners is what are you doing in that light? Or have you missed an opportunity where you could have actually created either a safe space for somebody, been a bit more courageous, been a bit more heartfelt, and maybe expressed or used some of these different components of the framework, whether it's the mind, whether it's the message, whether it's the trust, or whether it's the heart? And I don't know whether you want to say something before I give a quote for the episode, because I've given the listeners a task and an action. I want to give them a quote. And then right after that, I am going to wrap it up because we've got your links and bio somewhere here. But is there something that you want to say around what I've just mentioned?
Well, it's you said refreshing, right? So you asked such great questions. It's been such an easygoing conversation with you, and that's refreshing to me. Actually, you allowed me to share and to inspire around what I believe is important. Freedom is super important to me, so it's also about the freedom to show up as a leader you are, because we need different types of leaders, we need different personalities. Yes, we need specific traits and skills always in any leader, but we also need the different leadership personifications. So that for one part. And then you also, everybody can show up as a leader in their own lives. You've probably heard that 1,000 times. So maybe you find an opportunity where you can be a leader, even if you don't have a formal leadership role. And yes, also help other people enjoy more freedom in any sense. Right? I write a lot about freedom. I have a LinkedIn newsletter where I write about these topics too. So freedom is a big one for me. Yes, thanks for mentioning that. It's also the freedom to live what I call your freaking amazing life.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So, with that, freaking amazing life. The quote for the episode is leadership comes in small acts as well as bold strokes. The reason why for me that was sort of that resonated is because not only are we talking about small acts when you're doing your Roomba dancing or
Dumbolo.
no, but even beyond that, because that expression of a step, the expression of standing up, having a presence, being rising up to a moment, and 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 being part of, I guess, a dance, right? Being part
Mhm.
of a team, and within that, not only are you engaging, but you are leading and at times following, and all of that is a small step, but it's a bold step. And sometimes you might be 26 years old, be stepping into a leadership role, and you might ask yourself, how am I gonna sort of navigate through this? And I'm sure when you were 26, you wished in Spain 10 months later, you only learned Spanish and you were thinking, man, how on earth am I going to get through this? And quite frankly, I love the fact that you've sort of reversed and you've reflected back and given us, within your new paradigm framework, the four components that are very important. That is mind, message, trust, and heart. And with that self empowering mindset, not only do you bring not only are you able to help others once you've helped yourself, I think the ability to know yourself is the first part of being able to connect with your own confidence, or the power of your own confidence. Once you understand that, then people are able to grow and follow and lead, and you're able to give more to your teams. And that first element, even though you were picking a favorite child out of four, I have to say, is that mindset. And I found so much, how can I say it? Like, it was so beautiful, the story that you talked about, but also even more so the vulnerability that you showed. Um, and all centered around an authenticity, an energy, a presence, and you cannot do it without practice. If we then add on to that is that messaging, and Spanish is a language, but it is not the only language that helped you navigate through that space. And even if you're in California and somebody's a bit loud, that's okay. Because I think the beauty of what a world that we live in is the connectedness and differences and the uniqueness of people. But you need to be able to understand and be sensitive, listen more than you talk, and be able to understand the different cues. You talked about the verbal silence, or the silence that exists, that in it too comes a lot of messaging and communication. Trust. I I would not be able to work in a space that I do not feel trusted. And with that, you drive innovation, you drive transparency, you actually grow the team to be the most unapologetic version of themselves. And those micromanagers who stand there and make you do things, I think, your story around being able to delegate and the tools and tips that you provided the listeners around how you break down that whole element of being able to trust somebody allows for them to also be able to express, and you don't have to be 100% right. You don't have to get everything your way. I'm such a control freak, and sometimes this is so difficult for me, but if you're able to trust, you're able to delegate, you're able to build, you're able to collaborate. And that then takes us to that
Thank
heart
you so
set
much
where
for saying that, for being so vulnerable with it, because most people have a problem with micromanaging
no,
delegation.
and the thing is,
Most of us do.
it's so crazy because it is the hardest thing. And I'll tell you right now, I'm sitting with a presentation that I'm reviewing, right? And I'm like, I really don't like the format. I don't like a lot of things here, but I I can see what they're doing, and I'm fighting against this whole, is it me just trying to micromanage, or should I also allow for somebody to be able to express some things? It's a work in progress.
I get it.
However,
I get it.
that hard set where you connect with people, because people are the essence of an organization. People are an essence of a team, and in this modern world where we don't know whether it's AI generated or not, I think your connection with the heart is more important than probably anything else that we can even talk about. Though you chose that as your fourth component, I
It's
strongly
it's
I
not
know.
priority, not order of priority, not at all. It's just like how I think about the little diagram that I have for it. Just go around the. But no, no,
and
uh,
and that
those three.
intuitive nature, the courage, the compassion. I think that your hope and your what you would like to see coming from more people is a wonderful demonstration of the impact and the authenticity that you carry as you do your work. Because at the end of the day, if we're able to connect with people, we're able to be authentic, we're able to be vulnerable, we are able to show up better, we're able to understand people better, we're able to drive better teams, and in the whole process, have fun. living life and working. Regina, it is an absolute pleasure having you today, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
And thank you so much again, and also for being such a wonderful listener because you summarized it so beautifully.
Now, and for all the listeners, I think, can you please do me a favor? Can you please just let us know one more time your handles or your where people can find you? Or I mean, you talked about a lot of things. Um, uh, you've got the frameworks, but you've also got different articles that you've written. I mean, please, where
I
can
know.
people find you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to my website. You'll find basically almost everything there. It's called transformyourperformance.com. So it includes everything else, even a link to the Rise to Lead podcast. It includes all the links to my social media, YouTube channel, books, etc. Right? And there's also a link that is simply transformyourperformance.com/social links that has all the links in one place. So that's another one, but just you got to type it without the www or it won't
Okay.
appear.
Well, we're going to still put it down in the
Mm.
bio or in the description. So that's beautiful. So, for anybody who loved the episode and you want to share this with somebody who's either leading your team, struggling being led, sitting in a toxic workspace, and looking for tips and advice around how they can be better, be stronger, be more authentic, please, you have you've listened to this wonderful episode, and I'd like to encourage you to share, to like, to subscribe, and in fact, help us get to that impact of 1 million lives by 2026.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.